Welcome to Sword and Shield, the official podcast of the 960th Cyberspace Wing. Join us for insight, knowledge, mentorship, and some fun as we discuss relevant topics in and around our wing. Please understand that the views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the U.S. Air Force nor the Air Force Reserve, and no endorsement of any particular person or business is ever intended.
All right, welcome, gladiators, to another episode of the Sword and Shield. I'm Chief Master Sergeant Christopher Howard, 960th COG Superintendent, and today with me I have...
Hey, this is Chief Bischoff, Command Chief, 960th Cyber Wing, your Command Chief. Glad to be here.
Awesome, thank you, Chief. And we also have a special guest.
It's Chief Master Sergeant Jeremy Malcom, 10th Air Force Command Chief.
Awesome, thank you, Chief. Welcome back, Chief Bischoff. I was wondering if you can kind of let the gladiators know what you've been up to and, say a few words to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So lots of changes while I've been gone. It's like you guys wait until I got out of the building and like, all right, quick, he's gone. Let's start doing some awesome, cool stuff. But no, so I got a call to handle some special stuff down at England. So I've been down there hanging with a bunch of F-22 Raptor folks and some T-38 folks at the 44th Fighter Group. So helping them do some stuff and get to the 960th level of awesomeness. Been very interesting going back from the kind of stuff that we do here to being in a fighter group. Right. Obviously, a lot of the terminology was a little bit different and personalities were a little bit different and everything. It is very, very, very different having everybody in the same spot. So there's like 209 folks there as opposed to our very distributed chunk of folks. And they've got one mission. And we're like, wow, this is like a mancation here. I mean, it's, not nearly as diverse as being at the 960th, but very, very glad to be back. And I'm going to give a quick shout out here for Chief Howard. Chief Howard's just been crushing it while I've been gone and doing awesome stuff and getting things like this up and off the ground. And that's the kind of stuff, that's the innovation I'm excited about getting back here and being a part of again. So just glad to be back and looking forward to reintegrating.
Awesome. Welcome back, Chief. No, it's glad to have you back. You give us a lot of credit, but it comes down to the base that we got set, right? We're changing that culture. We're building up towards something new. I'm going to, not to bag on our Raptors brothers and sisters, but I think that the digital daggers down here are probably a lot more fun than just going out there in Florida, right?
That absolutely is true. I'll tell you what, we have a way, way cooler mission and we're doing battle every day. So I'm like, right. Yeah, gotcha. You guys are cool and flying around the flagpole and stuff. But you can't beat cyber.
Well, we're everywhere, right? That's a cool thing about cyber.
And I told them that. I'm like, look, you guys are all like, super, super, super awesome and super cool, but I got to deal with a keyboard that'll shut you down in about 8 seconds. So you're welcome.
Awesome. And Chief Malcom, welcome to the Sword and Shield, and we appreciate you taking the time today to speak to us. And then you're going to be around the wing a little bit today, at least JBSA specifically. Mm-hmm. But you've also been able to go out to other units like the 23rd recently as well. I was wondering if you can kind of give us some insight of what you're seeing out there as the NAF Command Chief.
So the first few months since I've taken over have been very interesting with COVID. So we haven't been able to get out on the road as much as we would like to, which has been unfortunate. But we have been able to stay in contact virtually, reaching out to units, kind of helping with kind of these uncertain times and what we're doing. The last 3 weeks, General Borgen and I have been able to get out to our units. You mentioned up at Travis,
yep.
23rd Combat Com, which was an awesome visit. So I think some of our airmen are out there excited to kind of see somewhat of a normalcy getting back.
Can imagine.
Yeah, getting back out there. So we're getting some good feedback on that. We were kind of torn on whether or not it was the right time because we have a lot of people that are still teleworking.
Right.
So when we go do a unit visit, we're very aware that we're going to miss seeing a lot of our people. But that's just kind of what we have to deal with. We're going to try to capture and see as many people as we possibly can. And then hopefully this thing will kind of die down a little bit. And maybe next visit, I'll be able to see a lot more people.
Right. Yeah, I know that, the 960th is somewhat unique, but most wings are, right? With our GSUs, I think that the good thing that we're taking out of this COVID situation is the ability to find new technology and new processes so that we can reach across multiple GSUs and still connect on a regular basis. I think that connectivity piece that you brought up of seeing that normalcy is helpful. And I'm hoping that this technology, things like the podcast, Zoom, and the CVR teams that getting used regularly will help build some of those bridges that we were seeing before. What do you think, Chief Bischoff, about COVID and the changes that are coming along?
Yeah, it's been very different. Obviously, I think we were teed up a lot better. One being reservists, so we're used to being somewhat mobile.
Right.
We're used to these challenges that I can tell you right now. A lot of our active duty brothers and sisters out there we're not prepared for. Like VPNing in, they very rarely ever had to do that. We live off that when we're not here, so that was a big challenge for them. And I think it's highlighted a lot of things to make sure that we have capability and scalability within our networks and within our infrastructure that we hadn't planned on before. So I think it's put a lot of good light on there. I think cyber folks have really led from the front and being able to engage because as opposed to a lot of other folks, we're used to being able to, it's about plugging in, not where you plug in. So if that's at your office space, if that's at your house, if that's, somewhere in between, we work as a very versatile force. And as long as we have connectivity, then we're able to do our jobs and we're calm hot and making stuff happen. And I think that's been something that's been very hard for a lot of other disciplines and a lot of other folks to be able to adapt to. But I think they're getting there. And, I've just been very proud of how the 960th overall has been able to respond and continue hacking the mission, doing business and, shooting bad guys in the face through cyberspace, regardless of the sniffles. So, yeah.
No, I think, that plugging in, no matter where you are at, right, that's a key piece. And I think that I recall a conversation the last day or two with you, Chief Malcom, where you're talking about some of that engagement as leadership. I didn't know if you can kind of expand on your thoughts about leadership and the importance of engagement.
It is, we come from a citizen airman culture, right? So we have to embrace that. We know that we have TRs out there that have very demanding civilian jobs. And as we move up in ranks, typically responsibility level is going to continue to go up, and it's tough. That's a tough balance for like a senior chief to have a demanding civilian job and still be able to lead at a very high level. So we try to figure out ways, and technology is a perfect opportunity to make sure that you stay engaged through different types of apps. We use GroupMe all the time.
Right.
We talk about the triad between the commander, the first sergeant, and the senior enlisted, and staying connected. So like those GroupMe apps have been perfect because it's just a simple text message between the three of them, and then everybody's already linked in. They know what's going on. It's helped out quite a bit. So we try to make sure that our folks are staying engaged, but we try to make it as easy as possible. And currently, the good thing that's coming out of COVID is that we have learned to try to tap into technology even a little bit more to try to help with our leadership.
No, I fully agree. Right. And I think Chief Bischoff also put a nugget in there with that paradigm shift across the Air Force really happened. Well, DoD wide, right? We as reservists, we're already pretty in tune with finding ways to kind of connect, not only from a work perspective, but with the personnel throughout the month. And then this COVID thing helped, make that societal push where a lot of those applications really started coming on board. DoD wide, they put in a lot more infrastructure, allowing us to connect virtually a lot easier. They're clearing the roads for some of these applications and then finding new ways to make those connections between Zoom meetings. I mean, think about it. This time last year, we wouldn't have thought about doing a Zoom meeting with a family member, yet now it's become normal.
Yeah.
And yet now we're taking that and bringing that to the office space and making that connection with their airmen.
I think the other thing too is, and now, most of our cyber warriors were aware of this, but as the demand signal came out there for, using different technologies and so forth, a lot of people went on a lot of different apps, not knowing the security risks or the vulnerabilities. Right. And luckily, most of our folks were aware of that. So we kind of knew, hey, here's good platforms to be able to use to communicate effectively, and here's ones to stay away from.
Right, definitely.
And the other thing that we learned through this too is to make the adjustment. I mean, a year ago, I don't think that there's a lot of us that didn't really believe in teleworking or believe that it could be as effective as it is right now.
Right.
And I'm one of them. I mean, I'm one of those guys. I like to come into work. I like to look people in the eye, but I've realized that people can be as effective, if not more effective, working from home. So I think that has changed the way that we have looked at our work schedule and how we can do stuff. And I think we're going to be better for it coming out the back end of this.
I would agree. I think the other thing though that's incredibly important though. So in my civilian job that I had previously, I telecommuted for 4 years. Right. And I can tell you it makes it a lot more challenging. And I think some of us are seeing that. We've been doing it for a relatively short amount of time, but you miss a lot of those small conversation and those nuances. And the big thing that I know I've been dealing with working with the 44th Fighter Group and folks being there is, one, making sure you're responsive, right? So if I shoot out an email and I don't hear anything back for a couple of hours, that kind of gives the wrong optic. Or if I give you a phone call and I hear waves lapping on the beach, that's probably not a good thing. But the other thing too is I think people are learning that you have to be very careful using some of these different avenues out there, whether you're sending an email or whether you're shooting a text message to somebody, is because it can be misconstrued very easily. And there's been a few issues I've had to deal with where you were intending to send one message, but because there's not that visual cues and body language and there's not that tone and inflection, somebody else took it completely different. And now there's an issue that you have to deal with. So I think that's something that's always something to be cognizant of. So while you're sending stuff back and forth, I think whenever you can at least go voice on something, if not, some kind of VTC, I think that helps to make sure that the message that you're transmitting is the correct one that's being received.
Right. No, good point, Chief.
And we were talking with the first sergeants yesterday too, and one of the things that we're trying to be careful of is some people working from home, they don't that's not their desired environment. Right. They thrive with social interaction. So we've got to look at both sides of this. The people that are doing very well from home, but then some of those that really need to be coming back in the office. So I think we're going to see a lot of one-offs, and hopefully our first sergeants and chiefs can get involved with trying to really paying attention to the individual person and trying to see what works best for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when I was doing that telecommuting for the 4 years, it was interesting because there were other folks there in Panama City Beach that were also telecommuting. And what we would do is for the social interaction, we would actually get together and we rented a little bit of office space to be able to go in, just so you had some of that social interaction that was going on there. Even though people worked for different companies and so on and so forth, you had some of that where you didn't feel that isolationism at the house.
Yeah, no, agree. What I'm looking forward to is, more like that 6 months, year, 2 years down the road when we've really gotten some of these technologies locked in, and how do we, redistribute and balance a UTA, right? Mm-hmm. So, a lot of things that we're challenged with is those time constraints within a UTA. We have those 16 rough hours, right, give or take, based on the schedule and other parts of the commitment. But being able to use some of these new assets that are here, these platforms, and offload some of those minor things that eat up so much time during a UTA, maybe some of the pre-meetings, things like that. With the better technology, I think we'll see a lot more buy-in because we're used to it now, to take some of those pieces off the UTA and then allow for more training and other items that kind of get eaten away during that UTA.
I'll tell you what, I think the big winners in this whole thing really are reservists, right? Because before we kind of had to scrimp and save and see what kind of media we could use for things. But now that it's hit everybody in big Air Force and big government and stuff, we're like, hey, sweet. Now we have a bunch of new toys that we can use for being able to do these things, and VPN's more robust and so forth. Yep. Whereas, before you're going to VPN in and you're like, oh man, this is felt like I should, put a quarter in the slot and hopefully I got some dial-up speed or something. But so really out of the whole thing, while it has been unfortunate and there's been a lot of challenges, really, I think we're coming out on the plus side with this whole thing with just more opportunities and options like you were talking about.
Yeah, agreed. So you've brought up a couple times, some of those experiences with the 44th now. I think that was it. And then your previous experience with the 919th. And Chief, you're coming out of DM as a command chief before the NAF. I think that shows some key pieces about movement, right? So when we talk about leadership opportunities, some of the conversations we had recently was the need to move and expand those experiences. I was wondering if you guys can kind of expand on that thought, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the best advice I ever got was I did 14 years active duty, came off active duty as a tech sergeant, went into a master sergeant slot. And, the best advice I got was, hey, once you hit master sergeant, start looking around for other jobs. I was pretty fortunate, active duty side, that I had a wide breadth of experience. So I'd already done my national capital region stuff. I'd already had joint assignments. I'd already been an instructor, things like that. But, if you want to be able to continue to move up, you're going to have to start moving around because, I could have stayed where I was. But I never would have got to senior. I was sitting in a master sergeant IMA slot, and I found another opportunity and went to Seymour Johnson. And as a reservist, boom, got put on senior. And then I went down to Tyndall, and when was at Tyndall as a senior for a while, and I could have stayed there, retired as a senior. And then I saw an opportunity for a chief position out at Little Rock. So then I went out to Little Rock. And then, hey, I want to be a command chief. So then I went to Duke Field with the 919 Special Operations Wing. So you're going to have to move around. The good thing is that the family normally doesn't have to move around. Obviously, that may be different for arts and AGRs. But if you want to move up, you're going to have to move around. And what's awesome about that is that you're bringing experience from other tribes. And that's really what adds to your secret sauce there. Right, is that you have a breadth of experience. You've seen how other tribes do business, and you're able to bring all that goodness to wherever it is you're going, and that puts you head and shoulders over somebody who's been, same place their whole career, hasn't gone anywhere else and done anything else. If you think about it, it's kind of like, imagine if you want to be able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who grew up and lived in that same small town their whole life and never went anywhere and did anything, or someone who's been a world traveler, and you're able to hear about all these awesome experiences and stuff that they've done. So that's my 2 cents. Chief Malcom, what do you think?
I kind of start with I think the base of what we are, which is that citizen airman culture, right? We've got to embrace the fact that, sometimes, if you were active duty prior and you went to, like when I went out to Luke, I came in as a senior airman off active duty at Luke Air Force Base, didn't really know a whole lot about the reserve. But we had a group of people there that just loved being at Luke. Right.
Right.
So we can't forget that that's kind of our baseline, right? We're the reserve is set up to where we don't have to PCS or move. So I want to make sure that I encourage people to stay where they're at if they want. You do not have to go anywhere. If you're happy doing your job and you want to stay at that base, by all means, stay there. We need you to continue to, turn that wrench or tap on that keyboard or whatever it might be. But to Chief Bischoff's point, if your desire is to lead at a higher level, you may have to make those changes, right? Because the opportunity just may not be there for you at that base.
Right.
It's not like we're not forcing you to go somewhere. We're just saying, hey, if the opportunity you're looking for is not at your current base, you may have to change statuses. You may have to change bases.
Right.
And we'll help you get there through the EDP process, and that's why it's important to make sure you fill that out every year so you can tell that's your way of telling the Air Force what you want out of your career, and then I can help vector you there.
I agree, Chief. Right, it's not negative to stay in the same place, and we don't want to put any of that negative light on there by any means. It comes down to where is that breadth of experience, right? So even internal to a local base, right? So let's use JBSA as an example.
Yeah,
we have 2 different wings and 2 different NAPs. And then we also have ARPC over at Randolph. So depending on what your skill set is and your ability to adapt, you have opportunities, at least within that area, right, to move between those units and get that breadth of experience. And then also, if you're willing to drive a little bit, we have a base at Dias, not too far. We also have Carswell up in Dallas, which is not too far, Barksdale. And that they may push out some of those realms. But most of these things you could be home at night if needed, or still fairly close with minimal impact. But the point being is more of that breadth of experience and not being focused with the same problem set, right? We're trying to develop that critical thinking piece.
And that's something that's important. I think even, if you want to stay where you're at and you like what you're doing and you like the area and everything, that's perfectly fine. It's just a matter of if you're wanting to look like Chief Malcom was talking about for some of these more senior positions, you're not just sitting there waiting for somebody to retire or move on or something. Probably isn't a good life plan, right? So you want to look and see what other opportunities, and it may require changing statuses, like you said, or or changing locations. And if that's something you really want to do, then that's fine. If not, if you want to stay where you're at, one of the greatest maintainers I've come across was up there at Duke Field at the 919th. And he'd spent his whole career there, but that guy knew stuff inside out, backward, forward. He was a ninja, not only of that location and what was going on there and the history and stuff. I mean, he was the bedrock of what was happening there. So,
Right.
which is fine. But the other thing he did that was awesome is when it came time for annual tour, he'd go hit some other base, kind of like you were talking about, and
Right.
learn some of their secret ninja ways and bring that back to the home tribe. But it all comes down to what your goals are, what you want to do. And like Chief Malcom was talking about, put that in your REDP. That's why we've really been pushing that, not just for another paperwork exercise, but so that way we know what you want to do, where you want to go, and how we can kind of vector you there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Expectations management at that point, right?
Yeah.
We talk about that REDP, and we've really been beating that drum over the last few years as it's become a much more refined tool. Chief Malcom, I think you've probably sat on a couple boards at this point. Is there any kind of words of advice about an REDP that you could give us?
So it was about 5 years ago. I'll be honest, I didn't even know what an REDP was. That was when we were first starting to try to jump into it. So I kind of started looking at it, and kind of the easiest way to explain it was that, hey, that's your opportunity to tell the Air Force what you want out of your career,
Right.
And if you start there, then it becomes a little easier to digest and understand, because now it's just me as an individual going into that system and saying, okay, here's what I want out of my near term. Here's my near term goals, my midterm, and my long term goals. So I just came off of the board up at Buckley here 2 weeks ago, and we looked at. I was looking at all the chief records that were coming through. The biggest thing that we were seeing is that as you put these in, you're going to get vectors every single year. So when you get a vector that says, hey, you need to go complete this course, or we suggest you do this, you really need to work on those things. Because if you're telling us this is your desire is to become a group chief somewhere,
Right.
I'm going to help you get there, but you got to help yourself too, right? So if I look at your record a year later and you still haven't done any of those things we told you to do last year, it's a little harder to continue to vector you towards, something even bigger,
Right.
So I would suggest that, take those vectors seriously, try your hardest, and then put some comments into your EDP. If you weren't able to take that senior enlisted joint PME class last year because you got deployed or something happened, hey, no problem. Just put it in there. Tell us that you're working on it, and
Right.
we'll take that into consideration. The whole idea is to find a way to get you where you want to be. That's
Okay.
really what we want to do.
Right. I mean, that's the key piece there, right? Because it goes not only from you as the member, right? Goes to your supervisor. Often it'll go to another senior leader, whether it's your commander or a group superintendent or command chief, and then it goes onto the board. And there's some valuable comments that go in there. I know as a group superintendent, there's a couple of superintendents where I'm helping to find some of those vectors for them at a local level. And giving them some advice. And then the other piece that I don't think we hit often is the mentor piece, right? So with the REDP, prior to submission to the board, you can send it to a mentor. And then we as mentors can look at that and provide some inputs of, maybe, hey, you need to identify that piece, like you just said, Chief Malcom, about you didn't do this for this reason or whatever, right?
That's a great point. It just kind of gives an internal look to somebody that you trust. Say, hey, take a look at my record really quick and see what you see. And what do I need to add before it goes to the board? That's a great point. Make sure you get it to one of the mentors. And then, on the raider and then the senior enlisted, I would always say that try to make sure that is flowing through your senior enlisted, your organization before it goes to the board.
Right.
I'm not trying to take away from a squadron commander putting comments or something like that, but really I want the senior enlisted in your organization to hit that before it goes to the board, because that's, this is an enlisted development plan. As a chief of the organization, I would like to see the command chief vectoring, those seniors and chiefs coming through to the board.
Right. And you have a lot of good resources, don't you, Chief Bischoff, when it comes to REDP? I think you've got SharePoint and everything.
I do. So started kind of populating that here before I left, but now that we have a PA person, we're set up super for success. Thus we're having these podcasts. But I've been working on a lot of different content out there at the 44th, and I'm bringing all that back with me. So we have guides for filling out your REDP, what one looks for, or what one a good one looks like. recorded a few WebExes on those kinds of things,
Right.
Awards and decks, you name it, anything, writing EPRs, bullet writing. I've got tons and tons of content to be able to put out there. So there'll be email coming out shortly to everybody saying, here's where it is on the SharePoint. We're going to call it Chief's Corner. We're going to get it stood up, and so that way anybody can access it at any time. And if you have a question about something, you can go back, take a look, and have that answer.
It sounds like a future podcast.
Probably, yeah.
I've been taking up a lot of your guys' time this morning, and I really do appreciate all the words of wisdom. I was wondering if you might have any parting words for our gladiators, Chief Malcom.
So I'll tell you the three things that that General Borgen and I focus on as priorities within 10th Air Force are, number one is caring for airmen and our families. That is so important, especially right now. I mean, I know we have a lot of people out there that are out of work, stressed with their childcare situations and having to take care of that. Working from home when that hasn't been a thing in the past. So our number one priority right now is to really make sure that we are those aren't just words. We are trying to find ways to reach out to our airmen to say, hey, what do you need? How can we help? Right. And that's, that starts with our first sergeants and their chiefs and the commanders and stuff, trying to make sure that we're getting out there and seeing our people. Second priority that we do is providing combat power to the COCOMs, right? And what does that look like? I'm excited to be here this weekend to kind of see what the 960th part is in that combat power. Being a maintainer, I get to learn a lot today from my cyber brothers and sisters. So I'm excited for that. And our third priority is TFI, but also keeping that citizen airman concept in our mind about that. Right. You guys are integrated here at the 960th at several different levels with your active duty partners, and we want to make sure we're encouraging a very good relationship when it comes to that. But we cannot lose focus of that citizen airman culture. That's very important to us.
Yeah, even though we become operationalized quite well, we can't lose that piece of where our members are coming from, right? That civilian knowledge, those civilian requirements, and then that workload balance between family, citizen airmanship, and your work life.
Absolutely.
Chief Bischoff, you got any closing remarks? I didn't cut you off, Dad, Chief.
No, not at all. I appreciate the opportunity to sit down, my very first podcast, which I'm enjoying quite a bit. So I appreciate you guys inviting me over.
Yeah. So now that Chief Malcom has literally stolen all my thunder, I'll try and just add a couple of things. During, through all this, we talked about challenges and so forth. The important thing also to remember, besides the resiliency and everything and a part of the resiliency really is leadership, right? So, and you can lead at any level. And the most important thing about leadership is knowing where you're going, right? Because that's how you're a leader, not a manager. And I tell people a lot recently, let's say you're going up, you're going to climb Everest. The guy that you're following probably isn't necessarily, the richest, the smartest, the most handsome. But here's the deal. He knows where he's going. And that's why you're following him. Because otherwise you're going to die. Right. So, and you can lead at any level. You don't have to have a bunch of stripes or a bunch of rank or anything to lead at your level. And the most important thing, I think, when you're being a leader at that level is not only knowing where you're going and inspiring others to follow you, but keeping an eye on your fish tank. What I mean by that is General Highholt, former AFSOC commander, he used to talk to leaders all the time, what's your fish tank look like? And he'd put a slide up there, and the slide showed this just putrid fish tank. And there's, Scuba Steve's upside down, a little swimmer guy, and there's dead fish all over the place, and it looks like a really nasty pond. And he said, this is an example of toxic leadership. This is what happens when you have, racism and favoritism and just total toxicity. He's like, nothing can survive. Nothing's going to flourish whatsoever. And then he'd show another one, and there's a little bubbler over in the corner with a little sea chest, and Scuba Steve swimming around, and there's a bunch of fish, and it's very clean fish tank and so forth. And he said, "No, this is an example of a good, healthy leadership environment, right? Fish are able to flourish. There's a lot of awesome things going on here, and we don't have any of those kinds of things that are holding you back or holding you down. So, I would just say, as you're leading at your level, wherever your level happens to be, one, know where you're going, have a vision for that, and getting other people inspired. And number two, always keep an eye on your fish tank and making sure that that it's clean and that it's a place that airmen and their families can flourish.
Awesome, Chief. Another great audio visual there. With this story, I mean, the way you tie these things together just amazes me. And I'm not trying to blow smoke on your backside at all. I actually get quite tickled with some of those examples you bring together, right? And the way we can tie that together.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And again, I appreciate Chief Malcom, your time, Chief Bischoff, your time as well. And I wanted to sign off with our gladiators with, please listen to the words that we shared today. These are opinions, but definitely some good words of experience. Thank you for your dedication to your country. Thank you for your dedication to your unit, and thank you for all the time that you provide and give to us as a reserve. With that, gladiators, have a good day.